first thing I would like you to talk to people about and talk to me about, but I've heard it a lot before, but some people may not know this, is one of the things that really lights you up, which I think is hilarious, I joke with you about this, is shame. You
It's true.
love shame. You get
It's
so
true.
excited, like a little
It's
puppy
true.
dog, when you
It's
get to
true.
talk about shame, because of the fact that self-compassion is so useful for working with shame. So can you
Yeah.
please talk about that? Why,
Yeah. Yeah.
why does that light you up?
Yeah. Um, well, it lights me up on many different levels. Personally, my introduction to self-compassion was through the doorway of shame because I was struggling with public speaking anxiety, which I thought was an anxiety problem, but it was after I learned self-compassion, I actually could see the shame behind the anxiety, which kept me so anxious so long. I couldn't even see it, couldn't work with it. And so shame basically turned me on to self-compassion. But um, there, as a clinician, as a clinical psychologist, it's also really clear to me that shame is the elephant in the room. When people struggle with anger or depression or anxiety or grief, anytime there's something which is really sticky and you scratch your head, why is this so sticky? It's really helpful to look for shame because it's often invisibly holding that thing together. And so the main difficulty we've had in the field of clinical psychology is we haven't actually had an antidote to shame until we until researchers such as Paul Gilbert in the UK and now lots and lots of other people have basically found that self-compassion, if nothing else, is an antidote to shame. So to have something which can actually make a difference in with a with a with a factor that is so prevalent in emotional anguish and distress is remarkable. So that's really interesting to me. But the other thing that's interesting is at a pure theoretical level, Kristin, your three-component model of mindfulness versus over-identification or self-absorption, of common humanity versus isolation, and self-kindness versus self-criticism, the versus side are really key components of shame. So theoretically, the components of isolation and self-criticism and self-absorption, theoretically, self-compassion is basically the opposite of shame. But also the research shows this. We see over and over again, scores on your self-compassion scale. If somebody has a really high score on your scale, they're going to have a low score on shame scale and vice versa. And similarly, when people learn self-compassion in any way, if they learn it through taking the MSc program or if they go in psychotherapy or something, as their self-compassion increases, their shame decreases. So this is an amazing thing. And it's especially amazing. I can go on and on, as you can see, but it's especially amazing because the self-compassionate approach to shame is really positive. It's a non-pathological view. When people hear shame, they freak out. They say, "Oh, we basically it's a taboo word." When we say the name, we start to get engulfed by it. But we don't even need to say the name. All we need to do is to cultivate the resource of self-compassion, and shame begins to lose its grip. And so there are just so many reasons why this is the
Well,
best darn thing. Self-compassion for shame.
well, one of the things I love about the way you approach shame, and maybe you can expand on it a little bit, it's so touching, is self-compassion helps you realize that shame is an innocent emotion. And
Yeah,
that for many people, like, what? So can you
yeah,
explain a little bit what you mean by that?
yeah. So first of all, I don't mean that the consequences of shame are innocent. People do really bad things as a reaction to shame. They cause physical and emotional harm to themselves and others. They do all kinds of, dubious behaviors that to try not to feel shame, like substances and so forth. So the consequences of shame are terrible. However, the motivation behind shame, in other words, why do we even feel shame in the first place, is innocent, because it comes from the wish to be loved. And so every one of us was born into this world, not just with the wish, but the need to be loved. If we weren't loved, we couldn't survive even for a day, So, and this wish is with us now, as adults, and every single person in this world wishes to be loved. And, sometimes the word kind of is too laden with other meanings. So you can use other language like wish to connect, wish to belong, wish to be appreciated, wish to be valued, wish to be respected, wish to matter. But we all have that. We're social animals, and we all wish, as Paul Gilbert says, to be considered favorably in the minds of others. This is the motivation behind shame. In other words, if we didn't care what other people think, and we do, but if we didn't, we would never feel any shame. It wouldn't, frankly, matter to us what other people think. So the really cool thing is, first of all, it's not cool that we've all forgotten this, because this is one of the deepest motivations that human beings have. If we ever want to understand why people do anything in life, and you want to get really to the heart of it, look at the wish to be loved and all the crazy ways that we've tried to make that happen, But the really cool thing is that when we do remember that we wish to be loved, and particularly in a moment of shame, when we recognize in this moment of shame that I would not feel this way if I didn't wish to be loved, as all beings wish to be loved. If we didn't, in a moment of shame, when we can actually see the motivation behind shame, then shame loses its grip. In other words, we just are not so caught up in the story when we can connect with the motivation that makes us feel like this, because it brings us down to a very simple state of being, kind of a simple, humble, almost primordial state of being where shame doesn't exist. Nobody was born into this world ashamed, but we were born into this world with a wish to be loved. We learned to feel ashamed by how people have treated us. So we can get back, by connecting with this wish, to a very innocent place. So this is what makes shame an innocent emotion. And when we can see shame as an innocent emotion, then the most natural thing in the world, when we can see that shame arises because we wish to be loved and that this is innocent, the most natural thing in the world is to give ourselves compassion. So needless to say, when we feel shame, the last thing in the world that we can accept is compassion. So how do we actually open to this healing medicine when we need it the most, when we're ashamed? How do we open to it? Well, we can open to it by seeing the motivation behind shame and connecting with our innocence, which opens the door, and then giving ourselves compassion, most natural thing in the world.